I'm Marine Conservation League's Executive Director, Kate Schulbach. And if this is your first event with Marine Conservation League, welcome. For 90 years, we've safeguarded our shared environment with our mission of protecting and preserving Marin County, while continuing to solve our current environmental problems and anticipating future ones in our changing world. And this after hours program is a webinar forum to spotlight a topic, actions, or events that are current and critical to Marin and beyond. And the purpose is to provide information to and educate us all while we learn from a guest speaker experienced and intimately knowledgeable about the topic. And you can learn the full scope of Marine Conservation League, what we do, our community offerings, and other opportunities by visiting our website. We'll have the URL of marineconservationleague.org up at the end. But a few housekeeping rules before we get started. We'll ask you to stay on mute, and we will mute you if we see by accident you've accidentally unmuted yourself. The presentation tonight will be about 40 minutes, and please hold your questions to the end. We'll be taking your questions by hand while also monitoring the chat. And before I jump into my introduction of Meghan tonight, I wanted to take a moment and acknowledge Ed Schultz, longtime MCL supporter, keeper of Jack Daniel's whiskey bottles. Was that it, Ed?
Jim Beam.
Jim Beam, a countywide environmental advocate for so many decades, for planting the seed for this great event. Not only did Ed come into my office with lists of bear sightings and enthusiasm after hearing Meghan speak himself, but we couldn't have made the connection to have her here tonight with us without him. So thank you, Ed. We had close to 100 people register for this event, and I can't see how many are here in the Zoom, but we're all being enriched and educated because of that connection, so thank you. And without further ado, we're thrilled to welcome esteemed author, environmentalist, and conservationist, Meghan Walla-Murphy, to our MCL After Hours this evening. Tonight, Meghan will illustrate the essential role that bears play within our marine ecosystem, their contributions to the rich biodiversity of our county, how their place has been changing over time as a result of our influence, and what the future looks like for this beautiful creature. Meghan has been able to combine her passions for wildlife tracking, writing, and people into vocations of habitat conservation and public awareness. And as an educator, ecologist, and author of books, essays, and articles, Meghan strives to help people connect to their external and internal landscapes. And she's been tracking animals avidly for more than 2 decades, which adds a depth and breadth into her work and habitat connectivity and outreach. She's director of the North Bay Bear Collaborative. She's also co-authored a book on tracking with carnivore biologist Dr. James Halfpenny, as well as a book on the historical ecology of salmonids in the Russian River. Meghan has traveled extensively in the US, Brazil, the Congo, and Southern Africa to learn from diverse teachers who use tracking for research, land stewardship, and education. This ancient art has given Meghan the skills to read a landscape and better understand ecology, which she then applies to help solve conservation and social justice challenges in her community. We are honored to have Meghan with us here tonight. Welcome. We cannot wait to learn from you, Meghan. It's all yours.
Wow. Well, thanks, Kate. I'm like, I should have you around all the time. You sound so impressive. Anyway, thank you. And thank you, MCL and Ed and all of the people who kind of conspired to bring me here. And thank you all of you who are sitting there in the audience. Thanks to my office, we get to be here together, and I'm in Occidental right now. It's a gorgeous summer day and cooling down. So welcome to Occidental via our little boxes. I'm just going to start sharing my screen, and we're going to jump into the wonderful world of bears in the North Bay. Let me just... Great. And can you all see that? You can just give me a thumbs up if you can see. Great.
Yep.
I always just like to start with this slide because, you know, there's this image of mama bears. They're so protective and they're fierce and you're going to be attacked. And yet they're also really gentle and curious. And I really like to start with this picture because it's a great story. One of the things of over 20 years, as Kate said, of tracking bears and lots of different kinds of wildlife is I have learned that bears are really good at teaching us boundaries and holding boundaries. And so this was in Yellowstone. I've gotten to work there extensively with a carnivore biologist. And following grizzlies and black bears around and learning all kinds of stuff. And this was a very early summer morning, maybe like 4:30 or 5 in the morning. And there was this mama black bear, and she had her cubs, and she was very close to the road, so I could sit, on the road in my car and watch her. And she was maybe only like 50 feet away. And the cubs were kind of playing and tussling, and she sat down and they crawled up her belly and started nursing. And I was like, oh, this is so cute, just totally vibing off of it. It was really neat. And noticing, as many of my friends, I don't have my own children, but they have kids, and they'll say, yeah, when our kids are nursing, sometimes they get distracted and they'll, start messing around, and it's a pain and it's kind of a bother. Well, so were these cubs, and they started tussling with each other while they were nursing and kind of nudging each other like little kids will do. And you could hear mom growling. I was like, oh, this is going to be interesting. And they kept messing around, and she growled quite loudly. And then one of them must have bit her because she yelped. She was like, "Yep!" And then the next thing that happened was she stood up, and the cubs just tumbled off of her and rolled down the hill. And I was like, oh, she's a good mother, and she has boundaries, and she's teaching boundaries. So what I have learned, and what we'll kind of go through this presentation, is bears teach boundaries, and they ask us to have really good boundaries if we're going to be good neighbors for them. So let's go on with the journey and see where we go. Whenever I start, I like to start with all of the teachers and lands and waters and animals and plants that have really brought me to this place that I get to be. And so as I speak, I am by no means an expert in anything I'm saying. You're hearing my experience, and there's a long legacy of people with a lot of knowledge behind me supporting where I get to come today. So there's just a little bit of the knowledge that's my own, and then this vast legacy of incredible people behind me. So hats off to all of our teachers and all the places we've gotten to live that teaches us too. I always like to start with this relationship of bears and humans. Given that I'm in advocacy and conservation and applied science, that intersection of wildlife and humans is really interesting to me. And, I'll give you a couple seconds to read this quote, and then we'll kind of dive in a little bit more deeply. One of the things that I have learned by going into that intersection of bear and human is that if you live in the Northern Hemisphere, it is likely that someone in your own ancestry had a relationship with bears. The more and more I dig into it, whether I am looking into Siberia or Europe or even Mexico or the Inuit, or India, there's this deep relationship of humans and bears. And almost all of those cultures exclusively talk about how bears taught humans what to eat, how to live in the cold, what medicines to use. And this is a picture of a black bear digging roots, and also a picture of a young Yurok girl digging what we call bear root or OSHA root. In many California tribes, and actually all over the Montane West, OSHA is bear root, and it's pretty well recognized that bears taught humans about that root. And it turns out it's this excellent medicine for coughs and colds and fevers. And there's a lot of foods that we eat that we've been taught by the bears. Bears also are up in our skies and our stories, and a lot of our language, like born and bearing and bear down or bare feet, all come from that sound, that sound. Ursula, Ursus comes from that sound that bears make. And there's a beautiful book called The Sacred Paw, and there's a whole chapter on about how our modern language stems back from our relationship with bears. A really, really wonderful book. And to that kind of effect or cause, there's initiations and ceremonies and rites of passage all over the Northern Hemisphere that are in deep relationship with bears. This is a picture from England, a painting about bears and celebration. California and the Pacific coast have deep, deep bear dances and relationships. On the left is a bronze statue of the Chumash bear dance, of which I've been invited to, and remarkable. In the middle is a Haida mask for a bear dance that they hold. And on the right is an Inuit sculpture of polar bears dancing. And there's a polar bear dance as well. And these dances were all about healing, not only for an individual, but also for the land and for what is to come. the indigenous people of Japan had a deep bear celebrations. Ireland, all over Europe, there are these incredible bear relationships. So it's in all of our ancestry. So we know how to live with bears. And in a lot of these cases, it was polar bears and grizzly bears and brown bears. And what we're going to be talking about today is mostly black bears. The other thing that's incredible is, and if this seems a little gruesome, it might be, but it's also really amazing. The skeletons of bears and humans are almost identical, with the exception of our head and neck and skull, of course. But the hands of a bear and the hands of a human are only different by this one knuckle right in here, this extra bone. And similarly, the feet of bears and humans are really incredible. So there's all kinds of shape-shifting stories in all of these cultures of bears and humans interrelating that way. And I just find that fascinating, because we do know how to be with these critters. We just need to kind of remember how to do that. The other thing about bears is that there are these incredible ecological species that used to be really prevalent all over California, and their role, we're missing a lot of the roles that they used to play. So I love salmon, and it's funny, I was talking to my dear friend who's a Yurok, and I was telling him, God, how much I love salmon. He's like, oh, of course, you're a bear. All bears love salmon. And it turns out that that relationship with anadromous species like salmon and trout and bears are deeply intertwined. Here's another really great book and quote about bears and that relationship of salmon and our forests. Let's give you a minute to read that. So while I have never gotten to see the anadromous nutrient pump or cycle in action along our coast, I have gotten to see it happen in the Tahoe Basin and Tahoe Lake. So these are kokanee salmon, which are also known as sockeye salmon. They are a stock salmon in the Tahoe Basin, but they work just like the indigenous salmon of the Tahoe Basin, which were the Lahontan cutthroat trout. And so instead of going to the ocean, these salmon spend most of their lives in the lake. And then when they come to spawn, they come up into the tributaries. So this is Taylor Creek in South Lake Tahoe. And you can see over here, these are the eggs of the salmon. And what happens is when the salmon come up to spawn, they guard their nests really carefully. They're also getting ready to die. And the bears will come in and they just grab those salmon. And we're talking hundreds of salmon coming up into these tributaries. And the bears will eat them and they'll disembowel them and eat the eggs for caviar. And this picture down here on the right is just a little nod to the beaver, which are so helpful for salmon habitat, and the little fry. But there's such incredible abundance of these salmon coming up into the tributaries. And this happens along the coast, where we are in Marin and Sonoma County. It's the Coho, the Steelhead, the Chinook in the Russian River. And this used to happen with the grizzlies and the anadromous nutrient cycle. And hundreds, if not thousands and thousands of salmon were coming up into these tributaries. And the bears would come, and there was such abundance, they would just eat the heads off the salmon, because that was the fat and the protein and the nutrients. And then they would literally just drop the rest of the fish, and then they'd go get another salmon and eat the head off. But in the meantime, they're leaving an abundance of food and nutrients right near the rivers. And so the coyotes, the foxes, the osprey, the eagles, the weasels, you name it, everybody is coming in to eat this salmon that the bears have pulled out of the river and brought out onto the land. The other thing that was amazing is when you're walking along these rivers, you start to see all this bear sign. And I'm curled up in a little bear bed next to the river. You can see bear claw marks and biting marks along this river. And then, of course, the old question, pardon my French, does a bear shit in the woods? Yes, they do. And this is, if you really want to look closely, this is a bear scat filled with fish guts and fish scales. But the bears go miles away from the river and they defecate out there. And in doing so, they're actually taking fish nutrients out into the forest. And when we're in streams and rivers that are ocean bearing, those salmon are transmitting and bringing in minerals from the ocean, these marine isotopes, that when foresters are studying the trees in the forest, they're finding the marine isotopes in the actual trees that have been growing for hundreds of years, with these salmon migrations and bears actually going out and spreading this poop out in the forest as fertilizer. So there's a whole cycle that's going on of the bears, the river, the water, and the nutrients for the forest. And right now, as we see our salmon plummeting, we don't know what's going to happen with our forests without those marine isotopes. But fingers crossed, you know, the salmon, people are working really hard. The bears are coming back. There's a lot more awareness. So hopefully we're going to start to reconnect those cycles. And that's just one of the many ecological niches that bears help to feed. So in the top left corner here is a grizzly. All the rest of these pictures are black bears. And we'll get into this a little bit more, but what I want to do is focus on grizzly for right now, because for most of California's history, it was predominantly a grizzly country. There were black bears in the northwest part of California coming across and then down through the Cascades and the Sierras, but Marin, Sonoma, Napa counties were predominantly grizzly bear country until 1924, when the last grizzly was shot in California. So we are standing at the 100-year mark of the last grizzly of California, and it's sad. It's a definite loss when you lose those big top-down predators. And what a charismatic, amazing critter. And really the only place we get to see the California grizzly is on the flag now, which I find terribly ironic. But if maybe you've heard the quote, nature abhors a vacuum. So we have had a landscape that has been without bears. And when I talk to some old timers, they're like, yeah, there were not bears in these counties, or you know, maybe the random bear comes through. And it's because we have about 2 generations of people who have lived in California without bears, unless they're in the kind of Sierras, Cascades, or that northwest area. So you'll say, oh no, there's not been bears here, but there were bears. And now there's a black bear population that's filling in from those places in the Sierras and Humboldt and Mendocino counties. And CDFW, you know, this is an old study from 2016, but CDFW is charting that bear populations are going up and up and up. And Stacy Martinelli, who's our district biologist from CDFW, she has shared that she believes these numbers are grossly underestimated, that there's on par probably of 55 to 65,000 black bears in California. And I'm not going to go into why that is, why it's so underestimated, but I'm happy to answer those questions later. So here is kind of a historic and, excuse me, old map. And you can see already way back in here in 1995 up to presently, the bears are moving. And here's an even more recent map, and you can see right here, Point Reyes is actually not hatch marked, but it should be. We do know that there are bears in Point Reyes, as well as some bears have been spotted down over here, east of the 101, and all over in kind of these zones here in Napa County and coming down into the Bay Area. So bears are happening. They are around and they're coming in. Mendocino and Humboldt counties have some of the highest densities of black bears in the lower 48. So, you know, North Bay is a natural corridor for dispersal for those bears. This is a great quote to read. When I moved to Occidental in 2012, 2013, a bear showed up just a mile or 2 from my home. And I got sent this picture and a wonderful quote here. Maybe some of you know Jim Coleman. He's a grassland vegetation biologist and lives at Occidental Arts and Ecology Center. And what I love about this quote is that our fridges, freezers, and gardens are but part of their larger ecosystem. So it's really important for us to remember that bears don't consider our homes separate from their life, right? We are part of their lives. We are part of their ecosystems, and food is food for them. So it's really important that we are humbly made aware of our larger, of this larger force that's on the land that we get to live with. So bear sightings are the norm right now. And it wasn't so even just 5 years ago, but I get probably 1 to half a dozen emails or calls or texts almost a week, especially during the summer, of like, hey, there's a bear here, hey, there's a bear there. And so that was kind of how the North Bay Bear Collaborative came into being. And in 2016 at Sugarloaf State Park, Bill Miller, who's a biologist with state parks over there, he had a wildlife camera up. And the conversation up until that point in 2016 is like, Yeah, we see a bear every now and then, but we don't know if there's a residential bear, if they're just kind of passing through. Well, in 2016, Bill Miller caught a bear and two cubs at Sugarloaf State Park on a wildlife camera, and there we had it. They were residing and reproducing in the Mayakama Mountains, which led to a small group of us coming together and talking about, well, how do we get ahead of this? Because bears, as we know, are a powerful force to live with, and we don't want to recreate kind of a Tahoe situation. So Breck Parkman, he's now retired, he was the California State archaeologist. He asked this really poignant question, which has now become basically our mission or our guiding light, our pole star for the organization, which is how do we bring back a bear culture in the North Bay? So California had a bear culture. People knew how to live with bears. Montana, people know how to live with bears. Canada, they take it for granted. And so how do we bring that back into the North Bay? And that was what led to the origins of the NBBC, the North Bay Bear Collaborative. We are truly a collaborative. We're not a nonprofit. We're not a corporation. We're a bunch of people who really like bears, or we're land managers, or we're wildlife managers, or we're tribal entities. We have 3 different tribal entities. We have Jackson Family Vineyards, Kevin Lundy of the ranches. He's part of our team out there. And then a lot of state agencies and One Tam, Golden Gate National Recreation Area, and several nonprofits are all part of our collaborative. And we get together quarterly and we talk about a lot of different stuff, and it's really fun. I work in many different conservation venues, and this is by far one of the most easygoing, fun, truly communicative groups I get to work with. And Kate had said I'm the director of this organization. I am not. I am just one of many leads, and we all get to come together and work together, which I am thankful that I'm not the lead of it, because there's a lot of bears out there. So we share a lot of stories. We do a lot of outreach like we're doing here. We do have a research project. We are tracking and mapping the bears. We are not collaring them, although CDFW is planning on starting a collaring project in the next couple of months. They have the funding for the collars. They're just waiting for some other bureaucratic decisions to be made, but it is planned, and we will certainly help them. A lot of our members will have bears probably trapped on the lands that they manage, and those collars, I think, are slated to stay on for 2 to 3 years. And then we have a big education component to our collaborative. As far as our research project, it's a DNA project. We're in year 5. And as far as I know, this is the longest bear DNA project going in California State, and we're excited about it. It started working with CDFW, asking the question of, what are the population estimates? And we have a lot of expertise in where the bears were and a lot of volunteers. So I helped design the protocol. And so for the first 2 years, we were working with them, and then they felt they got their answers, and we as a collaborative have continued this project on. We're working in relationship with UC Davis, and all of our scat kits analyzed, and we're looking at individuals and dispersal, food preferences, all kinds of good stuff. Here's breaking news. We only got this information about a month ago. We did have 2 or 3 scat samples come in from Marin last year. It's the first time Marin had a really big showing, and that we did collect scat in Marin last year. And one of the bears started out the year before at Sugarloaf. So one of the bears roaming around Marin is from Sugarloaf. We don't know how many bears are there, and I'm really happy to answer questions. We do know that at one point we were able to track at least 5 different individuals. Whether or not they stayed there, we don't know. We'll get a lot more information from collaring, and that will help us to kind of show where they're moving. We also have multi-year tribal youth projects. We're working with the California Indian Museum and Cultural Center, and as well as the Kashaya tribe. And for both of those organizations, we're in year 3, where we have tribal youth, where they get to go out and learn vegetation surveys, bear biology. They're learning to set up wildlife cameras. And they're also, the grant funding that we've attained allows them to work with their elders to start gathering the wisdom of how to live with bears and bear stories, because a lot of the elders are moving along in this world, and so we want the young ones to be able to still hold those stories. And this is one of my greatest joys, that I get to go out and learn a lot from these folks. So the other piece that feels really important to me that the MBBC really pushes is, please share this information out there. The more people who understand that we do live with bears now in the North Bay and how to live with them, the easier it's going to be for everybody, for the bears, for us. Moving on. So when I'd spoken to Kate and Martha, one of the things that we had talked about going really deeply after I did a kind of intro was, what about bears and their ecology, and how do we get to be part of this active conservation? One of the things that we at the collaborative really look at is, can bears be an icon or symbol of good stewardship of our open spaces? What we know now, as we learn more about fire and lack of stewardship, is that we're losing diversity in our open spaces. We're losing food sources and forage for wildlife. So, and what we know is that bears like to eat, and they eat a lot of different things. So if we can keep a healthy open space out there with lots of diverse foods, the bears are more likely to stay in those open spaces rather than coming in to towns for human sources of food and trash. So can bears kind of be this bridge of us having better stewardship in our open spaces? So we'll look at bears and their food preferences. In hard to believe, but in spring, the main diet of bears is grass and forbs. They are lawnmowers, and I'll show you a video in a minute of just bears eating grass. They are also eating all of the fruit. Down on the right are pin cherries, choke cherries, any kind of fruit that they eat. Here's a bear that was walking down really in the middle of Santa Rosa, walking down Stony Point Road, and took a right on Santa Rosa Creek. And this poor little young dispersal bear was eating just plums. And there's the Santa Rosa plums that are all up and down the creeks. And I don't know if you've seen them, but like when they're yellow and green and not quite ripe, that was what this bear was eating. And I know after I eat pounds and pounds of cherries, my belly feels like what the scat looks like. And sorry to share it, that might have been TMI. But you can see all these pits in here, and there are plum pits all over. They'll eat hundreds. Okay, everybody, hope that this video works. This is bear in Yellowstone. Is that working for you all? Okay, great. So you can just see that this bear is just moving around eating grass. What's amazing is that they're actually preferential for the types of grasses that they will eat. They have preferences of flowers that they'll eat. This is in Yellowstone, so obviously there's a little bit of a difference in the diet, but our bears do the same thing. That grass scat that I showed you is from somewhere in Sonoma. So it's hard for people to believe, but they are absolute lawn mowers in the spring. They also eat a lot of insects. This is kind of really classic bear signs. Snags are really important. So I know there's a lot of fear about cleaning up all the dead wood in our forests right now, but that dead wood is essential for insects and for everything that eats the insects and the larvae and decay and such. So bears love to eat insects. They're very fatty and high protein. They're also scavengers. If you talk to Dr. Quentin Martins from Living with Lions, who's a friend and colleague, but as he's been trapping his mountain lions with deer carcasses from roadkill, he finds bears coming into almost every trap that he gets. And this was and this is consistent with a study that started a long time ago, around 2010 in Colorado, where someone was looking at diet preferences of mountain lions. And he started picking up on his cameras bears pushing mountain lions off their kills. So we don't know if this has been going on a long time or if this is something novel. My guess is it's novel for humans because we have wildlife cameras, but it's probably been going on for a long time. So bears are amazing scavengers. They are not great hunters. That's not to say that they can't hunt. As we know, they do go out and hunt fish and love that kind of protein, but they are not like a mountain lion. A mountain lion is a beautiful, beautiful hunter. Bears are kind of ambling around. They like sedentary food like cherries and plums and honey. The other thing, as far as conservation goes, and what we're trying to figure out is one of the things, so where's the food for bears? And then where do the bears like to den? And we actually, don't know where bears like to den. They have a lot of peculiar areas that can be really open, like you can see on this top picture. It's just open to the sky, but it feels safe enough. This might have been a mama bear who dug out a hole, and she's going to actually give birth to little ones in there. So their preferences are far and wide. This was a grizzly that I had been tracking and working with. I mean, and this is not a den, this is a bear bed, but trying to figure out where bears prefer to bed down during the summer when they're not denning is really important. But the bottom line is we actually don't know where the bears are denning in the North Bay. That is a big mystery. And it's part of what I love about this project is it's new, it's all discovery for us right now. There's not a lot of information about black bears in the North Bay because this was grizzly bear country. So all of the sightings and information you all can help us with, we love it. Because especially if you're like, I know where they're denning, please tell us. Like, not because we're going to go harass the bears, but because we want to make sure in our conservation efforts that we are protecting those bear denning sites so that they don't end up denning under our decks in our houses, because that just becomes a challenge for everybody, including the bears. So I think we have this opportunity right now to become really good stewards of our landscape. Maybe some of you are familiar with the book called Tending the Wild by M. Cat Anderson. She's another amazing friend and mentor of mine. And she did this groundbreaking work about this concept called tending and looking at how Indigenous California people were actually gardening in the wild. And what's funny, and I put this picture up on the left because when you type in an image of tending the wild, it shows this kind of like rugged, the wild, the beast, you need to kill it. But there's this whole other aspect of what does that even mean, wild? Many indigenous cultures around the world don't even have a word for wild because there was no separation between humans and their interaction with it. And so as we kind of explore this idea of tending the wild and this opportunity we have to re-engage in conservation, it also helps us to look at like, well, what does it mean to rewild ourselves so that we're part of the system and we're growing diversity and we're allowing for there to be more wild native foods on the land. And these are just some examples. This is Mabel McKay, and you can see these long sedge roots that she used for basketry. Acorns were heavily tended, actually all over the Northern Hemisphere where there were oak trees, but certainly in California. Again, there's a basket tending happening on the right. And fire was a really important concept for tending. I'm not sure what our time is, but I'm going to blast through the next few of these slides. I just wanted to, when I was talking with Kate and Martha, we're talking about just this idea about tending to just drop it into the seed is that, very little land anywhere in the world. And I've had the great pleasure of working with indigenous cultures and gift of working with indigenous cultures in many other countries. There was always this really deep interaction of this tending or gardening principle, and it was incredibly sophisticated and really complicated. When I start learning about how cultural burns were happening in California, there was like dozens and dozens and dozens of different kinds of burns. Some burns that only women could do, some burns that only men could do, some that were done in the rain, some that were done in the snow, some that were done in the hottest, driest parts of the year to bring back different kinds of responses in our ecology. So it wasn't just like, yeah, let's go light things on fire, let's go cut things down. It was, if you think, we get to study a PhD for 7 years, well, indigenous cultures have tens of thousands of years of history and learning behind them, and those stories were brought forward. So quickly, coppicing, when you will kind of cut down to the crown of a tree. These are hazelnuts. We do have native hazelnuts. It's an amazing food source and protein for all kinds of critters. You got to fight the squirrels and the jays for getting hazelnuts around here. Deer prune, humans have pruned. Pruning like huckleberries actually increases the amount of berries that comes out, which who doesn't want to eat more huckleberries? Sowing seeds, there was a lot of selective seed gathering and sowing because you wanted those food sources to come back. And then of course, weeding, that's a long-term practice. The things that you weeding is a subjective term, you know, it's the things you don't want growing in certain places. And people were weeding forever. Digging sticks, I had to put it in there just because I use a lot of digging sticks, and it's a nod to that. That could be a whole other lecture, but I'll throw that out there. And then burning. I think it's a, I was going to say it's a hot topic, no pun intended. It is a really prevalent hot topic that's important right now because we live in a fire ecology and a fire-prone landscape. And burning is probably one of the most effective tools that we can use to help bring diversity back to the landscape and more abundant food for wildlife. This was a slide that is shared by my friend Redbird Willie, who's part of the Cultural Conservancy and the land lover, as he likes to say, of Heron Shadow out here in Grayton. And these were all the goals of cultural burning. And one of the things that I love is this, it promotes diversity. When we go out into a lot of our forests now, we're seeing encroachment of different kinds of conifers or plants that don't actually produce food for wildlife, for humans, because we've had that fire suppression. So bringing fire back is really quite helpful. So let's talk about bears and fire specifically. There's a lot, I hear a lot of stories of like, oh, there's more bears because they don't have enough food on the land, or animals are coming down into the cities. I have to say, I work with a lot of different organizations, from, you know, the Hopland Research and Extension Center, who's doing a really cool fire study, to Pepperwood, who's done a lot of fire research, Audubon Canyon Ranch, and Napa Land Trust. And they've got cameras out pre and post fire, and we're not actually finding bears and animals moving off in these burn zones. You have to excuse me because I don't remember my years anymore, but we've had so many fires. And I believe this is the 2018 fire that came through. And this is up at Modini Mayakama Ranch that's now stewarded by Audubon Canyon Ranch. And this area was just this dog hair thicket of bishop pine. You couldn't walk through it. There were no birds. The understory was barren and dead. And this, I'm out here maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks after the fire had burned, and there is an elderberry coming up. This was a raspberry coming up. All of a sudden, all of these plants that had been in this dog hair thicket that had been suppressed by the conifers were starting to come up, and all of the foods were certainly wildlife foods, but bear foods. And there were even lilies that came up with the bulbs that bears could eat. And I'd been going to this place for years and never seen such an abundance of food. And then, of course, just I was looking more just to see what had happened. I wasn't actually out there looking for bears, but there was a bear track and a bear trail, and it was moving right along this ridge right here. And like I said, this was just a couple weeks after that. And there's lots of food out there. Not yet. We find bears going into burned areas. This picture is from Pepperwood. They're still marking trees and leaving sign in full reproduction. Pepperwood is only actually, Pepperwood who's burned 2 or 3 times in the past 5 or 6 years, and has had 98% of their landscape burned, has only seen an increase in bears, and I don't even believe a decrease in any of their other wildlife as well. This was from the glass fire. This came from a volunteer of ours, Alan Studley. This was, this is kind of near Montesal, the north end of the Wild Lake Dun Preserve that Napa Land Trust has, and just south of Robert Louis Stevenson. And this is an old walnut orchard that's no longer harvesting, but it still has old walnuts. And I had been going up there for the year before, tracking a lot of bears. And then there's the big glass fire that came in. And Alan sent me this picture just to see how close the fire was. And then this area that's been grayed out was also fire. And this was the area that we had been tracking a lot of bears within the last year, and just even a couple weeks before the fire happened. And you can read, you know, after 10 days after the glass fire, the bears were back in the walnut orchards. And here is a picture of those bears about 10 days later, and he's seen no slowdown of feeding and animals coming in and out. And one of the things I think that becomes really important for us to learn, and one of the most exceptional things that I saw, with the fire and bears and wildlife in general is just the same way we are evacuated when fires are close. That's what the animals do. They leave and they come back. I don't have this on pictures. I think Napa Land Trust has it, but there was a sow with her 3 cubs that was found around Wild Lake Dunn. And during the glass fire, she just went south and was able to have enough connected landscape to go 5 miles south and keep her and her cubs safe. And then within a couple months, she was back at Wild Lake Dunn. So she evacuated and she came back. But when we don't have intact wildlife connection and connectivity or corridors, the bears get trapped, the animals get trapped, and that's when we see a lot of challenges and disasters. So we have lots of opportunity of bringing back foods, of increasing connectivity, of putting fire back on the land, and just telling the stories, really. I feel like that's probably our most important role, is to witness and listen and then share. You know, I think that's really one of our greatest gifts that we can offer right now. And I'll, just coming back to this question, can we become better stewards? Like, how do we get to be part of this landscape? How do we get to increase food? And how do we get to kind of interact rather than being separate from? So with that, I will just say thank you. And this was a really great bear from a watershed ecology project I was working on in Colorado. I love this bear. And you're welcome to reach out to me. That's my personal website, and Being with Bears is our Bear Collaborative website. So thanks. And
Again, thank you so much. The links are shared in our chat, so thank you for that. And we'll go ahead and start taking questions, and we'll start with hands. So if anybody has a question for Meghan after such a fantastic presentation, feel free to raise your hand and I'll call on you. Botulis, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. Please go ahead.
Great presentation. Hi, Meghan. Good to see you again.
hi.
I'm a grass hugger, and I'm very curious if you happen to know what kinds of grasses they don't like and what kind they do like. Also, I was just in Slovenia where there's 1,000 brown bears,
Yes.
and it's mostly they're mostly stewarded by the hunters, and they feed them to keep them away from the farms as a conflict mitigation measure, which I thought was interesting. Anyway, take it away.
Yeah, so yay, grass huggers. I think grasses don't get enough love, especially those old growth bunch grasses. But the quick answer to your question is no, I don't know what they don't like. And we have found some seed stuff. They are eating juncus, they're eating sedges, all kinds of different forbs. I haven't been able to identify the grass seeds other than beyond that they're grass seeds, because once they're coming through, what we are hoping to do is expand our DNA study rather than just looking at individual bears, is to start getting into the nitty-gritty of individual seeds. But to your point of the brown bears in the Carpathian Mountains, Slovenia, Slovakia, Romania, they have a really high brown bear population. And what's fascinating about them is that they are a culture that has an unbroken lineage of living with brown bears. And so they have all these old techniques and tactics of living with bears. So I've been learning a lot by them. I've been invited to go back and track bears down there. But one of the things that keeps coming up, and I've seen this also in Canada with grizzlies, is bear buffers. And it kind of gets back to this idea of having more food in wild spaces. So the idea of bear buffers is finding the corridors and paths of which bears are moving into towns and villages or towards trash. And perpendicular to that corridor, you basically plant belts of food that the bears prefer. And it's been shown that they just stop. And they're like, great, why would I go any farther? And they just eat the food that's there. So most recently I was hired by the utility companies up in the Tahoe Basin to start talking about, is it possible to put bear buffers in utility rights of ways and easements to kind of start to get them to go either out of town or stop them before they get into town. Who knows if it'll work, but I'm spreading the gospel of bear buffers.
Please sign me up to help.
Awesome. Thank you, Bert.
Thank you, Bert. Nona.
Yeah, it's a question about geography. Excuse me, and you're talking about North Bay, and you may at the beginning have said something about South Bay, but are the barriers simply too great? I mean, there's marvelous habitat, I would think, in the Santa Cruz Mountains, down the peninsula, and so forth, but are the barriers simply too great? San Francisco Bay, the Bay itself, and the urban areas, to allow this migration to continue on south?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, Nona. So every now and then a bear will disperse into the Santa Cruz Mountains. So you'll get some wandering bear in there. The last time, and this came to me from a colleague, Rick Landman, who lives in the Santa Cruz Mountains, the last reproducing pair of black bears in the Santa Cruz Mountains was in 1978. Although there was a black bear sighted in Santa Clara County on the east side of 101 in May of this year of 2024. So they do cross the 101 because we know that that bear got from Sugarloaf over to Marin County. So they are finding ways, whether it's over or under, we don't know yet. And then from the south of the Santa Cruz Mountains, you do have bears all in the Santa Lucia range coming up into Carmel area. And that would be an interesting question. Like, can they get across like Watsonville and Hornet Slough area to get into there? What I know is that I don't know a lot. And we look at OR7, who made it from Oregon all the way down to Santa Barbara County. And now we have 7, recognized packs of wolves in California. Yeah. So dispersal happens, and it happens, if it almost feels like there's a tipping point, the bear, like nothing, and then somehow some of the scouts are like, hey, it's safe over here, come on. And I don't know if that's really what's going on, but somehow that message gets out there, and then you get a big population happening. So I would not be surprised if in the next couple of decades there's bears back in Santa Cruz.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
Megan. Pam.
Hi, this is a fantastic talk, Megan. Thank you. I have a picture that was taken last weekend at the Las Colinas sanitation ponds, and I was with someone who is quite a bear expert, and she took a photo of the bear scat, or what she thinks is bear scat. Would you like me to send it to you?
I would love it. And if you could give where, I didn't catch where you said, I heard the water pond.
San Rafael, Las Colinas sanitation ponds.
Yes, I would love that. And I will, we have part of what I didn't say is part of our volunteer crew. We have an emergency scat responder team. And I want t-shirts. If anyone wants to come up with that logo, that would be great. And we send people out to go pick up those kinds of scats because we will include those in our DNA project. And they turn to be really important scats because those are the outliers, like that Nona was talking about. So if you send me the GPS, I'll send Peter Bartow out there and hopefully he'll go pick it up.
Okay, I hope it was a week ago, but let's see. Okay,
they'll persist, those scats.
Thank you, Pam.
Yeah.
Any more questions for Megan? That's it. Megan, thank you for, I see Kate. I see some more. Kate Powers, you're next.
Hi, Megan. I wanted to know if you wanted to talk about the black bear that was reportedly in a older woman's house in Tahoe, and why that bear behaved that way, maybe, and how that's different from bears that are moving through wildlife corridors looking for food. I just thought you might have some insight on that.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. That is kind of the million-dollar question, and I've been asked that a lot in the last month or two. So for those of you who don't know, I can't remember the date right now, but it was about 6 weeks ago, maybe 2 months ago. The first reported fatality to a black bear in California was reported. And it was a woman, it was in Plumas County. And it was an elder woman who had purportedly been attacked by a bear in her kitchen and had died as a result of that. Initially, when she was found, they had thought that she had died and that the bear had found her. And then after an autopsy, it was shown that the bear had killed her. What I do know, there's still a lot of questions about it, but what I do know is that that specific bear had already had been broken into houses in the neighborhood, and had been kind of a challenge, and I don't know what the ethos of the neighborhood was, because sometimes people are really encouraging of bears to be around. And as I started the talk, bears beg us to have good boundaries. We really need to push bears away. But for whatever reason, this bear became habituated and really comfortable in this neighborhood. I had also been told that this was an elderly woman who was quite frail, and possibly sick. I don't know for sure. And so I think there's a, kind of a vicious combination in there. What happens, and what I've heard in Tahoe and understand, is that when people are attacked by bears in their homes, it's often because a bear has broken into the home and a human has startled the bear and cornered it accidentally, not purposefully, and no fault to the person who, it sucks for everybody. But what happens is someone hears something, they go down, and now they are between the door or the entryway, and the bear just goes. And the bear is being protective, and people will often be slashed or have some kind of cut or something as the bear is on their way out. In this case, if indeed this woman was elderly and frail, that could have been enough to cause her death. I don't know. So that's what I've heard from people who are closer to it, but I don't think there's any definitive reason about what was going on with that bear. That bear has since been euthanized as well. But Kate, I appreciate your question, because what I think the most important thing is we're starting to live in bear country, is human people really need to understand that we have to haze the bears. And there's a lot of people who are like, oh, I don't want to hurt the bear. Let me first tell you, you're not going to hurt these bears. I've seen like bear cubs fall like 30 feet out of a tree and they bounce and they're like, oh, okay. Bears are powerful and strong. It's really important that if a bear is coming too close, that you haze it, bang pots, shout, squirt a hose. Montana, all kinds of places, Canada, they use rubber bullets, they use paint guns to really get that bear out of the space. Because the only real result is if a bear is habituated, that bear is going to end up dead. Because once a bear learns that your home is a source of food, it's really hard to make a bear forget. It's easier to deter a bear and teach a bear than it is to make a bear forget. So it behooves us to have really good boundaries and keep our trash locked up, and have proper safety mechanisms around whatever attractants there could be. So yeah, it's really unfortunate that whatever was going on in that interaction, and I feel for the woman and her family, I feel for the bear. And I just really hope our communities, we are pretty eco-literate here in the North Bay, that we will choose to get on board with bear hazing and doing proper bear maintenance stuff. Thanks, Kate, for bringing that up.
Thank you, Megan. Bertulis, I see your hand up again.
Thank you. Yeah, curious about given how in Europe there's this great coexistence of brown bears and humans, and it's in areas where it's very debated as well. And compared to our North American brown bear genetics, do you think what would you say about how the genetic difference between the European brown bear and our subspecies might inform an assisted migration plan into back through the West?
Are you talking about like how are grizzlies going to disperse and move across the US?
And as we're planning corridors, right? We're actively planning corridors. And so how do we think about which corridors we emphasize?
Yep. So that is a lot of discussion as kind of rewilding becomes a more planned conservation technique of how do we get to bring these missing iconic species back that are really important ecologically. And so great question, because it's not appropriate for grizzlies to be everywhere or for, you know, wolverines to be everywhere. Like there's a wolverine moving through downtown Eugene 6 weeks ago, right? That's a bummer for that wolverine and for all kinds of different people. So there's a lot of thought about if you are to kind of encourage corridors and movement, how do you keep them, you know, where are the landing spots, you know, where are they going to go? But in a lot of it, we don't have control. Like the animals are here and they're going to start moving their way. So I think my answer to you is how do we better understand where they're moving and then build protections for both the bears or whatever species it is and the human populations that are living close. You know, and really people are like, oh, you get to work with bears. And really my work is I get to work with humans on behalf of the bears. I would say like I'm hired by the bears to work with humans. So, and so I think that's probably the best answer I have for you, because a lot of corridor work is actually reversing that. We are not establishing where the corridors are. We're tracking and monitoring and learning where the animals are moving and then building conservation around that. Yeah.
Megan?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Ed, I see your hand up.
Unmuted. A couple of things. I know that we had 3 pages of sightings and photos and scat things from 2021 to 2023 in Marin County. 3 pages of them, and I just know that they're here, and that's got that. But I have a friend that had a vineyard in Nicasio, and bears got into all of his prime grapes. He put electric fence in, resolved the problem. Another
Yes.
acquaintance had a compost out in Inverness. Bears got into that. He put a metal container out there, resolved the problem. So we can live with the bears. It's not a big thing right now. But I'm very conscious of the bear population as it's becoming more visible in Marin. And my concern is if someone has a bear in their yard, are they going to call the police? Are they going to call 911? Are they going to call Humane Society? I think there has to be some kind of a protocol, and depending on the situation, who responds to it. We don't want to shoot the things. I mean, people panic. Oh my God, it's a bear in my garage. But there's people that can scoot them out. You don't want to take 2 garbage can lids. They don't affect that. That's kind of scary for a bear. But I think we need to resolve this with our 911 people, because people will call that. So Jason Weber, our fire chief of Marin County, I think he's in charge of 911 now. If he had some sort of a procedure when somebody calls about a bear, so we resolve it humanely.
Yeah. Yeah, Carolyn Whitesall, who I met when I first met you, she's working with UCANR, and she and I have started the discussion about getting together emergency protocols for emergency responders. And then it turns out Stacy from CDFW says those protocols actually exist. It's just now, how do we get them to the appropriate people?
Right.
I think it's a great strategy. Thank you for bringing that up.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
You Ed. Thank you, Megan. Is there any other last minute questions for Megan? If not, okay, thank you. And Megan, you did share your email address if anyone exits tonight and gets to thinking. So we'll put those up at the end as well. But thank you so much, Megan, for your presentation tonight. Thank you, everybody, for attending. And we are grateful to see so many faces that are new to us, as well as familiar friends. So, oh, I see Ed raised his hand again.
One quick question. Do we
Yes,
have
of course.
an emergency number for the poop patrol?
You can send it right to me or go to our website, Being with Bears, and then we'll hook you up with the right
They
people.
respond in Marin County, because I know your house in Sonoma County, but
Yeah, we've got Peter Bartow as our emergency.
okay, great.
person.
Peter,
I'm just on
You can go
I'm
right
just
to
on a
him.
Zoom. You missed the presentation.
great. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thank you,
all.
everybody.
Thank you.
Great presentation. Thanks.
Amazing,
Yeah.
inspiring.
Thank you all
you.
so much.